We hear a lot of perspectives on the Mankind podcast. Inclusion of a guest is not an endorsement of their views, and the opinions expressed here do not always represent the mission or values of the Mankind Project USA.
What if some of the most dangerous things we inherit as men aren't hardships, but the stories we're told about what those hardships mean? Stories about who we're supposed to be, who we're allowed to be, who we're destined to be, who we're stereotyped to be. Stories about what men are supposed to look like and feel like and endure in silence. Stories that say our past defines our future and that optimism is naive in this broken world. Today's conversation is about breaking those stories wide open. My guest is my friend, Michael Taylor. Michael's an entrepreneur, the author of 17 books, and he's what he calls a human potential architect. Michael grew up deep in poverty, lost everything he thought success was supposed to be, and spent way too much time homeless and depressed. And instead of letting it harden him or make him cynical, he made a radical choice to stay optimistic, responsible, and awake. In the episode today, we talk about the stereotypes that quietly shape men's lives, especially Black men's lives, and how those narratives limit what we believe is possible. We explore why optimism isn't denial, but discipline, and why doing our inner work is an act of resistance. We also talk about how redefining masculinity and Black masculinity away from fear, from dominance, from blame might be one of the most important cultural shifts of our time. This isn't about pretending the world isn't hard, but about choosing who we are because it is hard. Welcome to the Mankind Podcast. Hey, everybody, it's Boysen. Welcome back to the Mankind Podcast, the show where we break the molds of modern manhood to prove that there is indeed more than one way to be a man. Today, I get to chill out with a guy who I've known for like 15 years.
At least.
Coach Michael Taylor. Michael, say hello.
Hello, Boysen. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing so well. I'm good. And I'm better for seeing you. I think that's one of those things that always happen. Michael and I we sat in a virtual men's group together for a long time. I think I've got a chapter in one of his many, many books. We have done some in-person stuff. He's a Mankind Project brother. And you're going to hear a lot more about who Michael Taylor is during the show. But I just want to say this has been a long time coming, and I'm glad it's here. Michael Taylor, Coach Michael Taylor, is an entrepreneur. He's an author with 17 books published, a motivational speaker, and a human potential architect. That's a really cool phrase. Who helps people redesign their inner world so that they can live from purpose, power, and possibility. He is the author of Adversity is Your Greatest Ally and Knock Knock, Who's There? It's Me, God. He is the creator of the Shattering the Stereotypes documentary, which we're going to be talking about today, and Movement, which empowers men, particularly Black men, to challenge limiting narratives and reclaim agency over their lives. Through books, talks, podcasts, and workshops, Michael explores how adversity serves as an invitation to awakening, self-responsibility, and deeper connection with purpose. His work bridges personal development, spirituality, and practical transformation, inviting people to hear what he calls their sacred knock and courageously answer it. That is the man that I've known for all of these years. That is 100% you, Michael.
Well, I just got to say, first of all, dude, I am so pumped to be here with you because, first of all, I just love you as a guy. You're just an amazing guy. Like I said, we've been together for years and years and years, and you and I have had this amazing connection from day one. And so I'm just honored to be here on the podcast with you, but most importantly, just to be here with you as a friend.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And you are, yeah, I'll get, give you some flowers right now. Like, you are a guy who I have regarded as a model of what self-responsibility and drive look like. And kind of, I'm gonna say, like, it's weird to say, but like effortless hustle. Like, you hustle, absolutely, but you make it look easy. You make it look smooth, and you just keep going. So it invites me. So you mentioned to me in our last phone call that your friends, some of your friends call you Michael Happy Ass Taylor. Let's start there. And that is also who I know you to be. So Happy
Well,
Ass Taylor, why?
first of all, I was born in the inner city projects of Corpus Christi, Texas, to a single mom with 6 kids, and we were basically the poster children for poverty back in the 60s. But despite our financial situation, my mom was the most positive, optimistic person that I've ever met. I never once heard her complain about anything, and she always told me to look at the bright side of things. So
Hmm.
that's, I think, the origin of my optimism. And it is that energy that she gave me, even as a kid, that everything was going to be okay. And that's what stuck with me. And so the happy ass thing comes because a couple of the Warrior brothers, Russell Richard and Ernest Patterson and
Oh,
Judge
yeah.
Maddox, those three guys. So we were in a small group and we were checking in. And Russell looks at me. He goes, "Michael, you and your happy ass." Because whenever I would check in, it was generally going to be positive. I mean, and that was just me. But I'll never forget when he said that. And he's the one that actually gave me the name. You happy ass Taylor. He said.
That's so funny. And I know that it's not, but so your origin story, I've heard pieces of your origin story. I've read pieces of your origin story. It ain't no easy, pal. Like, you've gone through some shit in your life, and yet you have held on to this. And you said it in when we first got on the phone today. It's like, I choose to be. I choose to be happy. Talk more about that.
Well, again, at the age of 23, I was living the American dream. I had the house, the wife, the 2.5 kids, the vacations, the 401k, and all of that. So I was living the American dream. And within about a 6.5 year time frame, that American dream turned into the American nightmare as I went through
Mm.
divorce, bankruptcy, foreclosure, a deep, deep state of depression. I was actually homeless for 2 years living out of my car. I lived out of a car for 2 years. So,
Wow.
yeah, I've been through the ringer. And amazingly, during the darkest period of my life, I asked myself a really simple question. And that question was, what does it mean to be a man?
Hmm.
Because I had done everything I thought a man was supposed to do to be happy,
Yeah.
and I was absolutely miserable. And I wanted to figure out why. And in asking myself that question, I began what I'll call my journey of transformation. And that journey began with me gaining the courage to go to therapy. That's how I
Mm.
started this journey. But I took a deep dive into reading books. That's always been my passion. I always want to figure stuff out. So man, I started reading all these books and back in the 90s. And when I started reading these books and I was asking that question about what it means to be a man, there were very few books out there specifically talking
That's
about
true.
what it meant to be a man. There was Iron John and Fire in the Belly by Sam Keen, I think was one of them. And they
Yep.
definitely didn't have any books by black guys. So
Right.
I was like, where are we at? Right. But again, that question led me on this
Hmm.
amazing journey. And again, I've done the Mankind Project. I've done tons of workshops and so forth. And I just decided, I wanted to figure out what it meant to be a man. But more importantly, I wanted to figure out how to be authentically happy because I had hid behind this mask for so long, this Mr.
Mm.
Nice Guy mask. I wanted to be real. I wanted to be authentic. And so, again, I started on this journey and I've been on that journey for the last 30 years.
Awesome. Your tagline talks about you being an irrepressible optimist with a passion for the impossible. So, real talk, where we're living today, how do you maintain optimism with all the current things that are going on, all of the kind of dark stuff that we're seeing in the world?
There's a woman named Barbara Marx Hubbard, And she wrote a book called Conscious Evolution. And in her book, she theorizes that human beings are still evolving. I buy that. I believe we are still evolving. And here's a couple of reasons why I believe that. If you think about it, if you go back 50, 60 years ago, most people couldn't even afford to go to therapy. It was a big deal. It was a psychological, you had psychiatrists back then, and people weren't really talking about mental health or transformation. Back then, we had the consciousness that, people were crazy. And if they weren't crazy, or if they were crazy, we sent them to a psychiatrist if they could afford it, and then they got help. Well, if you fast forward to today, the mainstream conversation that we're hearing, which we didn't hear 50 years ago, is about mental health. And so I reframe it a little bit, because I don't think it's really mental health that's the problem. The challenge is emotional health. And I think when we start addressing it from this human perspective, that we're all just human beings having this amazing human experience. But the key is, how do we learn to tap into, and especially from a male perspective, because again, I think the greatest challenge we have on the planet is to redefine manhood and masculinity, because I believe the overwhelming majority of issues facing our world today can be resolved by men doing their inner work. I really believe that. And I'm not blaming men. I'm not saying men are bad. I'm saying men are trapped in what I'll call an antiquated paradigm of masculinity.
Hear, hear.
And when we shift that paradigm and we get men to get comfortable with who they are, we start resolving a lot of issues facing our world. And so the reason for my optimism, the reason that I don't, first of all, buy into mainstream media, because first of all, the media's job is to show you everything that's wrong with the world. That's what it focuses on. That's what news is. What's wrong with the world, right? But if you think about it, there are a lot more things that are right with the world than are wrong with it. But we have a consciousness that says, pay attention to the news. Everybody's buying into this idea that the world's going to hell in a handbasket. I don't buy it. I believe personally that there is a divine intelligence that created this universe. This intelligence knows exactly what it's doing. When it set all this in motion, it had an intention. And the intention is for us as human beings to evolve. And that's why I'm so optimistic about the future, because I believe we have the capacity to evolve. And what my work is helping people do is just that, evolve.
I love the way that you have always, and even in that one statement that you just made, you bridge the gap between kind of, I don't know, I see you as like holding some traditional kind of space, right? Like you hold space for God in your life, like 100%. And you're bridging the gap to this like very esoteric, when you were talking about that, I was like Alan Watts, like the journey of people is just to evolve as people. Like we are the evolving face of the universe, right? Or, it's like universal truth, universal wisdom that you kind of always bring and always express.
And here's the amazing part about that, though, Boysen. I was a confirmed atheist for a while. I mean, I'm talking real, like, I was so convinced that there was no such thing as God. There was no such thing as a higher power. I was a huge fan of, you ever hear the book, The God Delusion?
Yeah. Sure.
You remember, that atheist, that real famous atheist guy? I can't remember his name right now. Yeah. And I loved his book. It just made sense to me. And I was so convinced that there was no such thing as God that I bought into that hook, line, and sinker. And it wasn't until I went on my own spiritual journey that I discovered my truth about God and the universe and how it works. And that's why I speak to the spiritual aspect without being religious.
Yeah. And I believe that you hold that. And I also hear you say over and over again, and like, here we go, men's work. I speak for myself, right? It is my belief that I believe that this is what I've learned for myself. Like you always have that. You always bring that back in.
Yeah.
So say more about like redefining manhood and masculinity. And now let's start to, like, you've been a powerful advocate for Black men doing this kind of personal development work this kind of like Mankind Project trainings, additional stuff like this, why do you think it's important for Black men to lean in to this work?
Well, one of the challenges we have as a collective, collectively speaking, Black people have a mistrust in some ways. When you look at this country and what it's done in the past, it's
grounded in reality, grounded in historical fact. You're like, yeah, it's not unearned, this mistrust.
Right. So there's this resistance, if you will. For example, I remember when I wrote my first book back in the 90s, and I was doing an interview, and this guy calls in and he asked me some of the people, because I was talking about reading books and so forth. He says, well, how many of those authors were Black? And I asked him, I said, well, why does that matter? He says, because, you got to have the Black perspective. I said, did you not notice I'm Black? Right? But there was this attack on me because I didn't have what I'll call an Afrocentric conversation about Black people being different from white people. Okay. But the point here is, for most of our lives since we've been in this country, we've relied on God to deal with all the challenges in the world. And I know I can't tell you how many times when I had an issue and I'd go to the minister and he'd always say, just pray about it. Well, that didn't fix nothing. I was like, why did we just pray about it? But I think, again, collectively, we are so rooted in Christianity and this idea that we're different and separate and that we have to do it our way. We still have this block, if you will, that we're not open to the idea that we're no different than any other group, right? We're just human beings. And when I say that, a lot of Black people think that I'm denying my ethnicity when I say that, but I'm not. I'm real rooted in my ethnicity, but I understand that the source of my power has nothing to do with my skin color. Who I am as a human being is all internal. And that's a real challenge that's I think we're slowly breaking down. Finally, there's more Black men that are doing this kind of work. I know now I'm looking at the brothers that are in MKP, because when I went through my weekend in 2002, I was the only Black person in the room. Period. Trainers, facilitators, and participants. I was the only Black guy there. And one guy came up to me afterwards and he asked me, what was that like? One of the trainers came, he said, what was it? I said, I didn't notice. I'm here to do my work. And that's what my focus is. So again, I think it's important that we as a collective shift our narratives a little about ourselves. And that's why I did this documentary. And that's why I did the book, Shattering Black Male Stereotypes, because we have to change our inner narratives about ourselves as Black people if we want our communities to change.
And I want to push and play with this a little bit too, because there's also like, my experience of you is, the word that gets thrown around, right, is like Pollyanna-ish or something like that, right? And I'm not going to, there's lots of other cultural words used that I'm not going to use.
Uncle Tom, sell out. I've been called it all, trust me.
But that's also not my experience of you, because you're also realistic. Like you also acknowledge like what you've experienced in the world, what you see in the world, what you have happening. So like what my experience of you in the Mankind Project has been that you've been a stand for Black men as a group, also getting together and recognizing some shared cultural experiences and recognizing how you walk through the world with all of this bias and all of these stereotypes being laid on you. And you continue to be a stand for putting the flag up and saying, yeah, and we can break those stereotypes.
Yeah, and again, I think it's important because as human beings, it's human nature. Okay, it's human nature to be within groups that look like yourself. That's just human nature. You're going to be more comfortable in someone that looks like you. Now, even in the Mankind Project, okay, we're committed to this inner work. There are some white guys that still have issues, if you will, that they haven't really looked at, and so they try to come across as I'm open. But yeah, they still have their biases. So what I do is I say, look, we should have communities of us so that we don't have to worry about being, attacked or judged or whatever. So we need those spaces, right?
Yeah.
We need Black spaces where we can get real with each other and authentic.
Yeah.
So, but again, to come back to that point about being Uncle Tom, I wrote a book called Brothers, Are You Listening? And the very first chapter was called the That's What White People Do mentality. And in that chapter, I challenged Black people to ask themselves if they're trapped in this idea that there's only certain things Black people can do, right? And in that, I had a list of like 20 things I just came up with. One of the things I said was therapy. So do Black people go to therapy? Well, back in the 90s, it was like almost taboo. Black people talking about therapy, right? Now, it's common. Everybody's talking about it. It's okay. So I've always advocated for, Black people doing this work. And in no way am I denying the challenges of racism, systemic racism. I know all that stuff's real. It's right there in your face.
It's right there. Yeah.
But I think there's enough people talking about that. Again, I focus more on responsibility. How can I empower you to become the best version of yourself? And that's why I use the term human potential architect. As human beings, we have this innate capacity to create. Okay? If we focus on what's going on out there, we have no power. If I focus on racism and Trump and all that, I'm looking outside of myself. I choose not to do that. I ask myself, what do I want to create? And I move from that place. What do I want to create? Well, I want to create unity in our communities. How do I do that? I do a documentary. I write a book. I do a workshop. So I'm always focused on how I can contribute. And it comes back to the spiritual belief that I have. Yeah. We all have a unique divine purpose. I dropped out of high school in the 11th grade because I convinced myself I could get rich selling vacuum cleaners.
I love that for you. I just love that.
I convinced myself I was going to get rich selling vacuum cleaners. I dropped out of high school, never sold a single vacuum cleaner. Bad choice. But my point here is I only have an 11th grade education. I don't have any special privilege. I wasn't born with a spoon in my mouth. I didn't have. And to be able to be a young Black kid in America, no formal education, no training, to write 17 books, appear on television, I'm kind of living proof of what's possible. Okay? Yeah. So again, it's really difficult at times to talk about empowerment because too many people want to hold on to the past. I choose to focus on the present and what we can do now.
And I'm going to bring it into, and you were also a guy who chop wood, carry water, right? Like you don't have, my judgment is that you don't carry around a lot of grandiosity about this stuff because like you're going to be when we get done with this conversation, you're going to be mopping the floor and doing whatever the thing is that you need to do next, right? To chop wood and carry water.
But see, a sure sign, I believe, of spirituality is humility. Because I don't claim to be doing all this. I recognize that there is something bigger than me that's driving everything. I'm not that arrogant to believe that I'm just some really smart guy. No, there's something bigger than me that's working through me. And that's what drives me. And I was just, the other day, I was sitting in my car and I was just thinking about the word caring. I just care about people. And where does that come from? Just to care. When I see people hurting, it hurts me. And I'm asking, so why do I feel that? Why do I care so much? Well, I think it's because of my connection to that which is larger than myself. It is that spiritual part of me that feels through the universe, feels the hurt, and then decides it wants to do something to eliminate that hurt. And that's what drives me. caring really drives me.
Thank you. I think that's actually a nice segue. So you reached out, and I know that you've been writing books, and you send me a ping, and I will put out little blurbs about your books as you write them. But you reached out and said, "Hey, I've got a documentary." And I was like, "What? Send me a link." And watch the first part of the Shattering Black Male Stereotypes documentary. Tell me about where the genesis for that idea was, and then talk us through it a little. I'll say more, but yeah, talk us through it a little bit.
Well, first of all, I love movies. Absolutely
Yeah.
love movies. As a matter of fact, I'm writing a screenplay for a movie called Adversity is Your Greatest Ally, which is going to be my life story. Okay. That's kind of the thing. But how the documentary came about, sitting up one day and I was watching a documentary and I thought, you know what? I think I can do that. I think I can do a documentary. Now, again, I have no film background, but as a speaker, the way that I envisioned it, I wrote the script in about 3 hours. I knew what I wanted to say in the documentary, but then I just needed to find I need a director to take my words and make it visual, right? And this is how cool the universe is. I set an intention to do this documentary. My wife calls me one day and she says, "Babe, don't forget, we've got to go to this thing on Sunday." I said, "What thing?" She says, "It's a film festival." Oh, so she has this client that does this Asian film festival every year. So we go to this Asian film festival. And I noticed throughout the film festival, there's this black guy walking around with a camera. I just noticed him, you know. So after the film festival, I tracked him down. I go, "Hey man, look, I'm looking for a director for a documentary that I want to put together. Do you know anything about documentaries?" And he looks at me and he goes, "That's my specialty." I go, "What?" So we get on the Zoom call. The guy's absolutely perfect. And I sent him the script and he got more excited than I was about it. He's about 30 years old. And he goes, "Oh, we got it." He said, "Oh, this is so perfect." So there's this synchronistic thing that just kind of happened. I found the perfect guy. He saw my vision and he was able to take my words, if you will, and then visually say, "This is what we want to say."
Yeah.
Because in Shattering Black Male Stereotypes, the very first stereotype that I address is the stereotype that black men are an endangered species. And this is what launched the idea for me to start writing books. I was in a restaurant and I overheard a conversation between these two apparently well-educated, well-spoken professional black men. And they were having a conversation about the eradication of black men from society. And this isn't exactly what they said, but I'm going to paraphrase basically what they were saying. The white man is holding us back. That's basically what they were saying, right? So I listened to the conversation for a minute, and then I walk over to the table. I apologize for eavesdropping. And I said, "Look, man, do you really believe what you just said?" And one of the guys looked up at me and he goes, "Absolutely. Don't you watch the news? I believe in 20 years, all black men will either be dead or in jail." His exact words: "All black men will either be dead or in jail in 20 years. Now, I knew there was nothing I could have said that would have changed his mind. So I put my hand on his shoulder and I said, "Don't believe the hype, my brother. Don't believe the hype." And I walked away. And as I walked away, there was a part of me that said, "Michael, you have to do something. You have to do something to change the mindset of black men." Now, at the time, I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know anything about writing books or whatever at the time. But when I heard that conversation, that part of me said I needed to do something. And then probably 2 or 3 years after that conversation, that's when I wrote my first book, because I remembered that conversation in the restaurant. And I go, "Oh, I get it. This is what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to write a book." And so that's how I began this whole process. When that conversation hit me, I said, I need to figure out why it is that some black men think the way that they do. And that's how the stereotype thing came about.
Thank you. And so that you've hit one, that's the first stereotype. Black men are an endangered species.
Yeah. So in this particular documentary, I covered 3 stereotypes. Number 1, that one's that one. Number 2, there's this idea that Black men all live in poverty and we're always struggling. And so in the documentary, I showcase a brother who's a business owner, amazing guy. And again, I hear through the media that there's a lack of Black male role models. There's never been a lack of Black male role models ever in this country. It's just we have not had the exposure. So rather than place blame and point fingers on racism, I said, why not create our own role model? Why not create a content place or place for content to showcase positive? And that's why I launched the Shatter the Stereotypes movement. And so again, in this documentary, what I'm attempting to do is let Black men see what maybe some of them have not seen, which are successful Black men. And another stereotype that we talk about in the film indirectly is this whole idea that all Black men are angry and violent. And so in this documentary, I have a therapist, Ernest Patterson, who, we just kind of talk about the willingness for us as Black men to deal with our emotional issues, to deal with the cause of that perceived anger. And so it's really just... it's a love letter to Black men. That's how I see this documentary. And it's actually a series. And, I'm learning a lot about filmmaking because I have so much that I want to say, but trying to figure out how to get it to fit into a 30-minute documentary can be really challenging. But there's going to be 2 additional films that cover some of the other stereotypes.
Yeah. Beautiful. Yes. It's a kind of, what we focus on expands kind of idea that you're bringing to the forefront. And that I did a chat conversation with ChatGPT last week, just a few days ago, asking sources for good news. And first it misinterpreted me and said good news as in like factual news. So it gave me a whole list of things. Here's where to go to get factual news. And I was like, no, like good news, optimistic news, good things about, and it spit out a whole bunch of stuff. It gave me a whole bunch of responses to that. And going down through that list, I had never heard of any of them. Of any of these, organizations that have been around for decades, media outlets that have been producing for decades, like all of these different like magazines that, well, okay, I'll take that back. Cause Yes Magazine, I've heard of Yes Magazine. That was one of the things that it threw out. But it seems like that's part of the same thing, is like that there's never not been Black role models.
Yeah, and
there's never not been.
Exactly. Yeah. And so it's amazing how what you don't see in mainstream media. Now, in my book,
changed, and it's getting better though. Can we also say that? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. As a matter of fact, in the book, I coined a phrase. I call it the CWBS, which is the collective white belief system.
Ooh.
So the CWBS is, and again, this is going back to Barbara Hubbard's theory about human evolution. So the way I see it, and again, this is how Michael Taylor sees it. There was a time in this country's history when the majority of white people were racist. That's why we had the Jim Crow laws and the laws that kept Black people from reading. That's why we had slavery, because the majority of white people had a consciousness that said Black people were inferior. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, good. That helps me define what you mean by racism. So racial hierarchy, inferiority, superiority. Thank you.
Right. So the CWBS is what was the foundation of this country, actually. But here's what I believe. Yes. If I buy into Barbara Hubbard's theory about evolution, every generation, because of human evolution, becomes less and less racist. So there came a tipping point. The tipping point was during the civil rights movement. Okay. During the civil rights movement, there were enough white people that became open-minded enough to the idea, ooh, maybe we're wrong. Maybe we're not superior. And so then there was a shift. And so from the civil rights movement to today, I believe each generation becomes less and less racist. Why is that? First of all, if you think about it, if we go back to 60, I'm 65, right? So if you go back to 60 years, the exposure, if you were a white person, the exposure that you had to black people was pretty limited.
Very, right. Yeah, very different.
And so what you may have saw was maybe on television, but generally in your family, there was a conversation around race, maybe not directly, but indirectly. But the level of consciousness back then was completely different than today, because now not only do you have exposure to black people, the younger generation has friends that are black. They have heroes that are black. They see blacks on television all the time. I mean, it's not a big deal. I remember back in the 60s, if you saw a black person on television, it was a big event.
Right.
People were calling each other, there's a black, Sidney Poitier's on TV. It was a big thing. But people forget, and let's put it into context. I think this is really important. As human beings, in our current state, we're approximately 250,000 years old. Okay?
Right.
Approximately 250,000 years old. If you buy into my theory, okay, 250,000 years of conscious growth, evolution, expansion, okay? So this thing called divine intelligence set all this in motion, and it knows what it's doing. And so what's happening is every generation evolves. Deeper and deeper levels of complexity. That's what evolution is. And so consciousness shifts. And what's happening now, despite what we see with Trump and everything, I personally believe, and this will rub a lot of people the wrong way. I personally believe the overwhelming majority of white people aren't racist. Okay? We hear the term that this is a racist country. Well, a country can't be racist, but its inhabitants can be. And so to me, a racist country is when the majority of people have a certain belief system. Now, we still have some internalized systems.
Systems. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, we still have some internalized systems that's still feeling the residue of racism. It's not gone by any stretch of the imagination. Okay? Look at our current political situation. So I'm not denying that. But again, the reasons for my optimism is in my 60-year lifespan, what I have seen this country go through is amazing in the context of a 250,000-year evolution of human beings.
Blip, yeah.
So
this blip.
Yeah, what's
love that.
That's how
love that. Thank you for bringing systems, and thank you for separating personal and the personal and what we experience as individuals or small groups, and from there are still like power dynamics, and we could even separate that separate it out of race. We can talk about domination power dynamics, domination systems that are still very much in place, that there are a lot of us out here and more of us out here saying, okay, we need to shift. We need to have an impact on these domination systems that are happening. Yeah. And that tension is always here.
Yeah. And when you look at a system where people are trying to erase our history.
Yeah. Right. Like why?
Yeah, exactly. Why? So again, it's those systems are still in place. And again, and this is where I get a lot of pushback. I'm not saying everything's perfect.
Right.
I'm not saying racism just disappeared. Right. What I am saying is there is a process, an evolutionary process that we're currently going through. And as a collective human species, are you familiar with Ken Wilber's work?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. Integral theory. We don't talk a lot about integral theory on the podcast, but yes, I'm pretty well versed.
So I love Ken Wilber's idea. He talks about the four worldviews, the egocentric, the ethnocentric, the cosmos, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And the overwhelming majority of human beings see the world through an ethnocentric lens. They think that, for me, ethnocentric says that if I'm different, if there's a different ethnicity, then that means we're separate and different from each other. But
Yeah.
a human-centric worldview says you can be black, you can be pink, you can be red, whatever, but we're still the same. That, to me, is how I see a human-centric worldview, and that's how I view the world. I don't
Thank
see
you.
the world through a ethnocentric, but more of a human-centric worldview.
Thank you. And I love, again, tension. Those, so egocentric, and I think there's a lot of folks walking around with just straight up egocentric worldviews today as well, right?
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
then the folks with
Most of
ethnocentric worldviews are trying to drag those egocentric people into that camp, into those camps, and then human centric and cosmocentric, like big picture, big thought. And I think another one of those tensions to manage is, I can tell you this, I can lay this out for you, I can speak integral theory, I can lay all this stuff on you. Doesn't mean you're going to get it. Doesn't mean that we're all going to agree about it. Doesn't mean that, right? And then it's on me to not play dominator.
Right.
It's on me to not try and dominate you with my cosmocentric worldview, if that's where I'm sitting, right? If that's where I'm hanging out.
But see, as human beings, we have this insatiable need to be right.
Nah, not me. I mean, maybe you have that, but I'm not like that at all.
We have this
Michael,
insatiable need to be right. And it is that need to be right that creates so much friction in the world.
Yes.
And so for me, I'd rather be happy than right. And so
Here.
I choose to, and again, this is why I think men's work and transformational work is so important.
Yes.
It allows me to, first of all, identify my own triggers, see what's going on with me first. And by focusing on me, and as you mentioned, when I'm speaking, I'm saying, this is my perception. I'm not telling you this is the way that it really is. I'm telling you this is how I see it. So everything that I'm saying right now is just Michael Taylor's perception of reality. And so there are some people that go, "Oh, I kind of like that. Let's go. Let's follow. I'm ready. I'm game for that." But then there are some people like, "You knucklehead, what are you talking about?" There's always going to be those people, right? So it really boils down to knowing your truth. This is just my truth that I'm sharing.
Thank you. What have you gained by through this truth that you're holding on to? What's in it? What's in it for guys who are listening to this? What's in it for us as a community to kind of start questioning the stereotypes, questioning the biasing, questioning the judgment systems that we have in place?
Well, I sum everything up into a very simple idea. I think what we all want more than anything is just peace. Now, I want you to think about this. When we're tied up in knots because we're saying Trump's an a-hole, this is that, we're all tied up in knots. We're not in peace. We're fighting against something. For me, what I get out of this is I have this inner sense of peace that, first of all, I am connected to something larger than myself. And that relationship is primary. It's fundamental to who I am as a human being. So I look at it from the standpoint of purpose. This divine intelligence knows what it's doing.
Yeah.
It chooses certain people to do certain things because in my reality, this divine intelligence can't create in this reality without us as human beings. That's why it created human beings in the first place, because it needs us to co-create. And so what brings me peace is knowing that this divine intelligence is moving through me as me. And it's saying, here's what we can do to make the world a little better. And so finding purpose, feeling connected, but most importantly, just feeling this sense of peace. For example, in all sincerity, Boysen, I can say right now, if I were to die right now,
please don't.
I have zero regrets. I have literally done everything that I've ever wanted to do. I always wanted to be a great father. That was high on my list. I wanted to be a great dad. I wanted to create a relationship, a partnership that really works. I have one. I've been blissfully married for the past 23 years. I actually want to live to be 100, to be honest. but I'm 65. I take really good care of myself. I'm in great shape. I feel good. So I've really done, and the writing the books and the TV shows and the documentaries, those are great. But ultimately, I know who I am and I'm at peace with myself. And I think that's ultimately the goal. We just want to feel at peace with who we are.
Beautifully said. Thank you. I'm reminded of, it's the pies check-ins that we use in the Mankind Project. It's physical, intellectual, emotional, spiritual, and there it all is. Michael's pie is whole.
Exactly. There you go. And all the other stuff is just icing on the cake.
Wait, you switched metaphors. We were in pie metaphors, and now you're in cake metaphors. Okay. What are we doing here, Michael? So how can people get more into, so just go to Amazon and look up Michael Taylor and you'll find his books. And what else do you want to plug right here?
First of all, go to shatterthestereotypes.com.
Thank you.
Shatterthestereotypes.com. You can gain access to the documentary for free. Not going to cost you a dime. The reviews have been amazing. And again, I believe we need to have more powerful, positive conversations about race and about all this. Here's a great opportunity. If you don't happen to be Black, here's a great opportunity for you to, number one, see an optimistic brother that's really positive, which is really good. But it starts to break down the stereotypes that you may be holding about Black people without even knowing it.
Yeah.
And it's not confrontational. It's not going to make you feel guilty. It's really just an opportunity to see something that you may not have seen in mainstream media. So shatterthestereotypes.com, and you'll have access to, I do courses for Black men, books are there, but the documentary, again, you can gain access to it. Secondly, if you go to coachmichaeltaylor.com, again, I like to think of myself as a human potential architect. And what I do is I help people redefine their inner world because it's all going on in here for the most part. And so by changing our mindsets, we can change our lives. And this has nothing to do with ethnicity. It has everything about being human. And so if you're dealing with adversity and you're looking for opportunities to shift your mindset about adversity, great resource. There's tons of free stuff. You can see all my books there. CoachMichaelTaylor.com is the resource for you.
Thank you. Michael Taylor, it's been such a pleasure to just hang out with you for a while, brother. And I love you, man. Long time.
There you go. And see, and even this conversation fuels my optimism, right? The fact that we're even having this conversation right now, and I don't know how many people will see this, but again, what it does for me, you and I, who again, I absolutely love. I love this guy, Boysen. Yes, I do. And again, we go way back and we've been having these conversations about male transformation for a while.
Yeah.
And the fact that I'm here having this conversation with you confirms for me that the universe is working. It's putting these positive messages out there. And that's all I'm trying to do.
Go check out Michael Taylor, CoachMichaelTaylor.com. And thank you, friend. I'll see you soon.
Absolutely. Take care.
This has been the Mankind Podcast, produced in association with the Mankind Project USA. And of course, I want to thank you, the listener, because through your attention and your support, you make it a heck of a lot easier for us to let men out there in the world know that they are not alone and that there is more than one way to be a man. And if you've been enjoying the music throughout this episode and all of our episodes, check out Jim, Donovan, and the Sun King Warriors. I have links to them in the show notes. Now, the fee for this episode is simple. If you found gold and insights that you believe could benefit your loved ones and those you care about, be sure to share it with them. And of course, remember that life doesn't happen to us. it happens for us, so long as we rip the pen out of fate's hand and become the author of our own story. So, my friend, pick up the pen, and we'll see you next week. Lots of love.
Hey, it's Boysen. On the Mankind podcast, we've brought some incredible guests on to talk about the importance of doing the work to improve our mental and emotional health. And here's the truth. Multiple times over the last 25 years, I've had the help of one-on-one work with some amazing therapists. For me, for my wife, for both of us as adoptive parents, and for our kids. The Mankind Project and Men's Group, though awesome, are not a substitute for professional mental health support. And so I'm thrilled that the Mankind Podcast now has BetterHelp as a sponsor for the show. BetterHelp works online. It asks you what you're working on and then matches you for live one-on-one sessions with a licensed therapist, someone trained to work with you, listen, and offer helpful insights. I'm using BetterHelp. It's super easy, and I like what I'm getting. If getting one-on-one support in the comfort of your own space feels like a good direction for you, I invite you to check it out. Go to the link in the show notes or betterhelp.com/mankind. And if you sign up, you'll get 10% off your first month of therapy.